talk about this Stuart Varney sound, because there is an attempt, at least in the Senate. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be stopped in the House. And yet, media is reporting on it seriously to stop the practice of inversion, which is a massive loophole in our tax code, wherein a corporation can essentially buy a subsidiary in a foreign country or can merge with a subsidiary, which has very little to do with their business. I mean, they could anything, really, any entity, and use that for tax purposes to evade U.S. taxes. Now, I note that this obviously is not going to pass. Nothing passes in the Senate and House these days. Nothing. And I note that it's being reported upon, and there are hearings, because we also hear conservatives talk about how impeachment is so impossible to imagine that it's just simply a scare tactic. We will talk about that later in the program. But Stuart Varney and Fox and Friends apparently think this notion of stopping corporations from either purchasing other corporations or merging for the explicit and often sole reason to avoid paying U.S. taxes. Here is Stuart Varney appearing on with the not very bright people on Fox and Friends.
The nation's largest drugstore chain, Walgreens, I was there yesterday. Well, apparently Walgreens is the latest company to consider shifting its...
It is unconfirmed as to whether or not Steve Ducey was at Walgreens, but let's just give him the benefit of the doubt.
Headquarters overseas due to the United States' high corporate tax structure.
Big companies are feeling due to a major tax loophole, and the president has some pretty harsh words for them.
A small but growing group of big corporations are fleeing the country to get out of paying taxes. They're keeping most of their business inside the United States, but they're basically renouncing their citizenship and declaring that they're based someplace else just to avoid paying their fair share.
That's the president's big address over the weekend. Here to explain is the host of Varney and Company, Stuart Varney. Stuart, unpatriotic companies leaving the country, what are they thinking?
Okay. The president, I think, is setting up business, setting up the Republicans so that in the election in November he can say, look at those people. They're taking their money overseas. They're unpatriotic. They're not doing the right thing. They're not paying their fair share. It's a setup so that the president can look very good come the November elections.
Right.
What he's... Okay, there's numerous corporations who want to leave...
So it's a setup. In other words, it's like a political argument that the president is making because it will make him look good because Americans resent the fact that these corporations are using our infrastructure and are simply skirting tax rates. Okay, this, of course, is very insidious and unheard of in politics.
Leave America, put their headquarters, couple of jobs overseas so that they can take advantage of lower tax rates over there compared to the sky-high rates over here. Now, the president wants to put a fence around America, stop anybody leaving. That's what he wants to do. Instead of encouraging them to stay...
Or getting on Congress and say lower the corporate tax rate.
Incentivize
right.
staying
But he does not negotiate with Congress. He doesn't deal with Congress. He doesn't have friends on the other side of the aisle with whom he could get together and structure some kind of a deal. But the worst result of all of this is that we've got $2.1 trillion of American corporate profits which are going to stay over there. Because if they come back over here, they lose 35% to the federal government. So it stays there. It doesn't do us any good here.
Let me put up...
Now, what he's also talking about is another practice where corporations offshore their profits and wait to repatriate their money. This is a different practice that he's conflating here, probably knowingly. During the Eisenhower presidency, American corporations were given a tax benefit to promote the development of other markets around the world. You'll remember it is after World War II, and Eisenhower says, you don't have to pay the corporate tax rate in this country until you repatriate the money. And that essential that benefit, that gift, was never rescinded. So back in 2005, George Bush, 2003 perhaps, and the Republicans passed the American Jobs Creation Act, which allowed the one-time repatriation of these profits that had been offshored at a 30% discount on taxes, ostensibly so that this would create jobs. Every study that has been done of the implications of that law has shown that 0 jobs were created. And in fact, many of the biggest proponents of this, the corporate proponents, ended up cutting jobs. It was just a way to provide dividends to their shareholders and bonuses to their executives.
A graphic. Let me show you, ladies and gentlemen, where businesses are not putting their money. They're not putting them in the UAE. Their tax rate is 55%. Here in the United States, we're at 40. Japan's 35, along with Angola and Argentina.
We're at 35. Continue.
Well, let me show you one other graphic that shows you recent big companies that have moved from the United States. Bausch & Lomb has gone to Canada. Jim Beam has gone to Japan. And Chiquita Banana is in Ireland.
And Walgreens is about to leave to go to Europe.
They buy a smaller company in order to move the headquarters there.
But instead of admitting that the environment here to maintain business at profit in the United States is bad, the president then is blaming companies for doing what they need to do.
American corporate profits are at near record highs. Continue.
Stay here, pay up, pay your fair share. That's what he's saying. Now, would you allow, for example, a company in Illinois to move to Texas to take advantage of lower taxes?
Absolutely.
Of course we do. So why don't we allow corporations to take advantage of low taxes?
And the whole thing, what is the goal of the corporation? To maximize profits and revenue for the investors and the shareholders.
To do that.
Absolutely.
Positive.
So that's...
So in other words, it's not like we get any benefit, according to these Fox and Friends people, if they stay here and pay their taxes in terms of jobs and investment. No, they're not doing anything differently. They're just not paying their fair share of taxes. So yes, it is obvious what you do. You build a fence around this country to keep them, metaphorical one, I should say, to keep them from skirting U.S. laws when it comes to paying their taxes.
That's capitalism. I know how you feel about it. Varney and Company, 11-1.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. That is indeed capitalism.